Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
Tracy set up Monica's will, Dalton asked Britt to cross Sidwell, and Ronnie honored Jack. In Dalton's office, Britt and Emma aren't happy to run into each other. Dalton explains that Britt is joining the platoon and needs access to the lab. You cannot give this sickie access to the lab. Emma barks. She says he can't trust her. Britt suggests Dalton better his adjunct and walks out. Dalton lectures Emma for disrespecting Britt and sends her home. At Lulu's, Tracy discovers Monica's will. There's a note explaining she hid it in Ellen's effects because she was sure there would be chicane. She rushes out saying, "Buckle up, Ronnie. I'm coming for ya." Emma meets Gio at Lulu's and tells him they need to use Rocco to get Dalton's key. They call Rocco down and ask him to get the key from Britt. He doesn't feel right about it. Emma says he'd be saving Britt from going down with Dalton. Reluctantly, he agrees and takes off to do it. They talk about his growing bond to the Quartermaines. He started to realize their history is his. Britt goes to GH and Liz asks if Brad has been in touch. Britt says that if he knows she's alive, he doesn't feel to care. At the Quartermaine estate, Drew pressures Ronnie to subscribe over the house. Outback runs in, grabs the papers and runs out with Drew chasing after him. BLQ and Chase join them as Cody walks in, looking for his canine. Drew orders him to find his mutt. Olivia and Ned walk in as Drew insists this needs to be handled moment so he can bobble them all out. He's eventually taking his place as head of the family. Michael says he'll no way be part of the family. Ned backs his up and declares Edward would have disowned him. Drew is sure Edward would do as he has done. They tell him family is about fidelity, not blood. Whatever, says Drew. Cody returns with the paperwork. Drew prompts Ronnie to subscribe and finish this. She'll no way have to deal with them again. Tracy runs in and declares she has the real will. She's surprised to see Ronnie has torn up the contract. Tracy explains she set up the real will on with a letter. Martin says it's probably a phony. Ronnie doesn't know if it's real, but she does know the will leaving the house to her was forged. Martin did it. Tracy grins and glares at him. Ronnie explains that she wasn't going to go on with Martin's plan until she met Tracy and she was so awful to her. She can see that she was wrong and that's why she couldn't go down with taking their home. She's glad Monica's wishes will eventually be recognized. She adds that Martin was blackmailing her to vend to Drew. That's all news to Drew. Ronnie admits Drew no way hovered her. Tracy orders Drew out. He exits but the family keeps Martin there. Tracy tells him he'll be going to big boy captivity and orders Chase to cuff him. As Chase leads Martin to the door, Ned gets an idea. Ronnie keeps apologizing to Tracy. Michael reads the will and explains that Monica left the house to Tracy. Sunny drops by Alexis' office. She tries to get relief of him but he's there to see her. Christina told him about her defense strategy for Willow. They argue about her defending Willow and she admits that Drew has forced her to do it in exchange for access to Scout. Sunny offers her a suspect who is Aunt Michael. He blurts out Portia's name. The council needs further. He explains that Nina and Portia arranged to have Drew cured and urges her to find out where the croaker was when Drew was shot. Drew barges in and is shocked to see them together. In Laura's office, she tells Sidwell she has no intention of working with him. He thinks they could make the megacity a better place. She offers to buy him a ticket out of city. Laughing, he makes a different offer. The mayor reminds him that he held her son interned. He allowed his jest. Since arriving would buy him some tolerance, he reminds her that mob violence long predates him and offers to help fund the original seminaries. That sounds like a fix to her. She's sure he wants the peers for felonious reasons and all his philanthropy won't change that. As he leaves, he knows she's not for trade, but adds that not all deals are financial. He's sure she has her price. Atgh, Portia complains to Liz about Jordan running to Curtis to tell him about the pregnancy. The croaker isn't sure how much longer she can delay telling him he might not be the father. She worries about having Britt back and Brad not being far before. Liz asks if his return could make problems for her. Portia says Brad has been dealt with. She realizes there's commodity she needs to take care of and takes off. Curtis drops by Jordan's and tells her she was right that Portia is pregnant. She congratulates him and assumes he'll remain married. He explains that having the baby might be the only thing they agree on. They're still getting a divorce. She asks if he and his woman have bandied their future. He wants to be a present father, but he also wants Jordan. She wants to be with him too but is spooked he'll change his mind. She can't handle losing him again. Curtis won't give up on her when they've an alternate chance. She suggests they take effects slow. He wants to do it right. As she kisses him at the door, Portia spots them. Martin goes to Laura's office and tells her he's in the middle of commodity tragic. The chapel was a sanctuary of soft light and hushed anticipation. The air, thick with the scent of beeswax and hope, should have been a balm, but for Ronnie, it was a gilded cage. Every whispered prayer, every note of the solemn hymn echoing from the organ, felt like a countdown to an execution she alone knew was coming. She stood near the font, a statue of maternal grace in a deceptively serene dress, her hands clasped so tightly the knuckles were a bloodless white. The smile she had pasted on her face felt like a crack in porcelain, threatening to shatter at the slightest pressure. Today was her son's baptism. It was also the day the world she had so meticulously built was scheduled to implode. Across the chapel, Cyrus Renaud observed the scene with the detached amusement of a chess master watching his opponent walk blindly into a checkmate. His presence was a dark stain on the ceremony, an uninvited specter at the feast. He had come not for spiritual renewal, but for a front-row seat to a demolition. His encouraging words to Laura Collins, spoken moments earlier, were a masterclass in duplicity. A day for new beginnings, he had said, his voice a low, unctuous murmur. A time for truth to finally come to light. Laura had accepted the sentiment with diplomatic grace, unaware that the truth he spoke of was a weapon aimed directly at the heart of the woman about to have her child baptized. The ceremony began. The priest's voice, rich and resonant, spoke of cleansing, of rebirth, of being welcomed into the arms of the divine. Each word was a lash against Ronnie's soul. Cleansing. Her life was a monument to filth, to lies layered upon lies. Rebirth. She was about to be thrown back into the gutter from which she had clawed her way out. As the holy water was trickled over her baby's forehead, a single, traitorous thought echoed in her mind, "This is the last moment of my life as I know it." Her eyes, wide and desperate, scanned the room. They locked with Cyrus's. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat overtly. He simply gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It was a signal. The axe was about to fall. As the final blessing was uttered and the congregation began to stir, a soft murmur of congratulations rising like steam, Cyrus moved. He cut through the well-wishers with the grim purpose of a bailiff approaching the condemned. Ronnie, his voice was deceptively gentle, a velvet glove hiding an iron fist. A moment of your time? There's a matter of some urgency regarding the late Martin's estate. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The cheerful chatter around her faded into a dull, roaring static. She could feel the curious eyes of Port Charles's elite upon her. Laura's gaze was particularly piercing, filled with a dawning suspicion. "Cyrus, this is neither the time nor the place," Ronnie managed, her voice a strained whisper. "This is my son's day." "And what a beautiful day it is," Cyrus replied, his eyes cold. "But legacy, Ronnie, waits for no one. Especially a legacy built on a foundation of fraud." He held up a single, slim document folder. It looked innocuous, but to Ronnie, it was a coffin nail. "Shall we step into the vestry?" "For privacy. Unless you'd prefer I share my findings with the entire congregation." Defeated, her legs moving on autopilot, Ronnie allowed herself to be guided into the small, wood-paneled room adjacent to the chapel. The door clicked shut, muffling the sounds of the celebration outside. They were alone. The scent of old books and sanctity was suffocating. "What do you want?" she hissed, the facade of the gracious mother crumbling away, revealing the cornered animal beneath. "What I've always wanted," Cyrus said, placing the folder on a simple oak desk. "The truth." "And what is the truth, Veronica?" The truth is that the last will and testament of your dearly departed husband, the document that bequeathed you his entire fortune, his company, his every last asset, is a forgery." The words hung in the air, precise and lethal as a surgeon's scalpel. He opened the folder, revealing a stack of papers. There were handwriting analyses, the damning testimony of a since-disappeared notary, and a side-by-side comparison of signatures. "You see," Cyrus continued, his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather, "the Martin who signed this document was already deep in the throes of his illness. His hand shook. His signature, as you can see on these verified documents from before his diagnosis, was always a firm, decisive slash. This," he tapped the will with a contemptuous finger, "is the careful, practiced hand of a forger. Your forger, to be precise. A man named Silas, currently enjoying an early retirement in Barbados, funded by an anonymous, though easily traceable, bank transfer from an account you control." Ronnie's breath hitched. She had been so careful. She had covered every track, paid off every loose end. But Cyrus had deeper pockets and a far more ruthless imagination. "You have no proof," she stammered, but the conviction was gone from her voice. It was a last, feeble gasp of denial. "I have a mountain of it," he corrected her softly. "Enough to not only have the will invalidated, sending his entire estate to a distant cousin in Switzerland, a man who, I assure you, has no affection for you, but also enough to have you charged with forgery, fraud, and grand larceny. You will lose everything, Ronnie. The house, the cars, the company stock, every piece of jewelry you've flaunted since his death. It will all be stripped from you. You will be a pariah, and then you will be a prisoner." He leaned forward, his presence dominating the small room. "But it doesn't have to be that way. I am not an unreasonable man. I am offering you a choice." "A choice?" she echoed, her mind reeling, the walls of the vestry seeming to close in on her. "Relinquish control of your late husband's shares in the merger with my pharmaceutical company. Sign them over to me, for a pittance, of course. Do that, and this evidence," he gestured to the folder, "disappears. The will stands, unchallenged. You keep your mansion, your money, your freedom. You simply lose the one piece of the pie I care about. The merger." It was the key to everything for Cyrus, a legitimate front for his empire, a pipeline into the city's infrastructure. Martin had been the sole holdout, the one board member who refused to be bullied or bought. And with his death, his voting shares had passed to Ronnie. She had been his final, posthumous line of defense. Now, Cyrus was forcing her to betray her husband's last wish to save her own skin. The sheer, monstrous weight of it all crashed down upon her. It wasn't just the money, though the thought of poverty after such opulence was a terror in itself. It was the utter annihilation of her identity. She wasn't just Martin's widow, she was the rich, powerful, untouchable Ronnie. Without that, who was she? A fraud. A nobody. A failed actress who had landed her greatest role and was now being booed off the stage. She thought of her son, asleep in his christening gown just yards away. What future would he have with a penniless mother? What future would he have with a mother in prison? The encouraging words she had whispered to him this morning, promises of a bright, beautiful future, now tasted like ash in her mouth. Her carefully constructed world, a beautiful, intricate soap bubble, had been popped by Cyrus's needle. Her vision began to tunnel, the dark wood of the vestry blurring at the edges. Cyrus's voice became a distant, buzzing drone. "Think of it not as a loss, but as a strategic retreat," he was saying. "You can still live comfortably. You just won't be in my way. Sign the papers, Ronnie. Save yourself. Save yourself." The words were a mockery. There was no salvation here, only damnation in different flavors. To betray Martin's memory and empower his greatest enemy, or to cling to a hollow principle and be utterly destroyed. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. A cold sweat broke out on her brow and the nape of her neck. The air grew thin, refusing to fill her lungs. The angry threats he had woven into his offer, the prison, the poverty, the disgrace, echoed in her skull, a cacophony of doom. I can't, she whispered, though she didn't know what she was refusing. The deal? The truth? The inevitable? You can, and you will, Cyrus said, his patience finally wearing thin. The mask of civility slipped, revealing the ruthless gangster beneath. Your time for playing the grieving heiress is over. Make your decision. Now. He slid a single sheet of paper, the transfer agreement, across the desk toward her, followed by a pen. The pen landed with a soft, final click. That click was the sound of her life ending. Ronnie's eyes dropped to the document. The legalese swam before her eyes, but one phrase stood out in stark, terrifying clarity: hereby relinquishes all rights, title, and interest. It was a confession. A surrender. A betrayal. A violent, physical wave of despair and terror washed over her. The last of the air in the room vanished. The world, which had been tilting, finally spun off its axis completely. A high-pitched whine filled her ears, drowning out all other sound. The image of Cyrus's cold, triumphant face was the last thing she registered. Her eyes rolled back into her head. A soft, broken sigh escaped her lips, a sound of utter and complete defeat. Her knees buckled, and her body, bereft of all strength, of all hope, crumpled. She fell to the hard, cold stone floor of the vestry in a dead faint, the pristine white of her baptism day outfit a stark contrast to the dark abyss that had just consumed her. For a moment, there was only silence. Cyrus looked down at her inert form, his expression one of mild distaste, as if he had just seen a bug crushed on the sidewalk. There was no pity, no alarm. He had gotten what he came for. The battle, if one could even call it that, was won. He stepped to the door and opened it, his face rearranging itself into a mask of concerned gravity. His voice, raised just enough to be heard over the chatter in the chapel, was a masterstroke of theatrical panic. Someone. Call a doctor. I'm afraid the emotion of the day has been too much for poor Ronnie. She's collapsed. The scene that followed was one of sudden, chaotic horror. The joyful celebration curdled into panic. Laura Collins rushed forward, her motherly instincts overriding her suspicions. The baby, startled by the commotion, began to wail. The baptismal font, a symbol of new life and purity, now stood as a silent witness to a soul's utter devastation. As people crowded around the vestry door, as phones were pulled out to call for help, Cyrus stood slightly apart. He didn't look at the woman on the floor. His gaze was turned inward, already calculating the next move. The spoils of this victory were his. The encouraging words he had offered were proven to be lies, the angry threats he had whispered were now a terrifying reality. The baptism was over. The war for Ronnie's soul, and her fortune, had just begun, and she had already lost the first, most crucial battle without ever throwing a punch. Her unconscious body was merely the first casualty.